Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, as I was listening to the resolution author's layout, he said a lot of words. Something really struck me when he talked about how the purpose of the resolution was to protect the House against outside influences. Outside influences. May I remind Chairman Vossoot and all of you, this whole thing started because of an outside influence named Donald J. Trump. Lest you forget, President Trump picked up the phone. He called Governor Abbott, said, "Governor, I need 5 new seats in Texas. And what you need to do is you need to go out and find majority-minority congressional districts and tear them apart and deny those communities representation so I can have 5 more yes men and women in Washington, D.C. who will never hold me accountable for anything. Not the Epstein files, not the big ugly bill, not anything." And Governor Abbott said, "Yes, sir." And y'all said, "Yes, Governor, we'll do what you and President Trump want us to do." That's how this started, an outside influence. There have been, in this century, 4 major quorum breaks in the Texas legislature. 2 in 2003, 1 in the House, 1 in the Senate, 1 in 2021, and the 1 this year. What did all 4 of those have in common? They all had to do with voting rights. They all had to do with legislation that systematically sought to disenfranchise minority Texans. It was the redistricting plans in 2003, another mid-decade congressional redistricting. It was the anti-voter legislation in 2021. And of course, it was this year's mid-decade congressional redistricting. And what I would like y'all to understand is my Democratic colleagues and I, we broke quorum not because it was fun, not because it was something that would help us in any way, politically, professionally, or any other way, but because it was the right thing to do for our constituents. And it was the right thing to do for the millions of primarily Black, Hispanic, and Asian Texans who are no longer going to have a voice in the U.S. Congress if this map eventually becomes law. And I predict, by the way, it will not eventually be enacted. But we thought it was important to stand up and fight for our constituents' voting rights. It was important to stand up and fight and say that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 still means something, even in the state of Texas. The Constitution of the United States still means something, even in the state of Texas. And so you can bring this resolution with all these penalties and punishments, all this retribution. The reality is, if you think that taking away my parking space is going to make me stop fighting for my constituents' voting rights, you are sadly mistaken. And I'm pretty confident I speak for every other Democratic member when I say that. So you can pass this, and you will pass this, and that's your right as the majority to do that. But it's bad for this House, and it misses the larger point, which is, I do agree with Chairman Vossoot on this. Outside influences on this body are a problem, and we've seen it over and over again this year on vouchers, and certainly on congressional redistricting, because Donald Trump made a phone call. And so I hope this body, this House, will learn to start to say no to these outside influences that are so damaging to the people of Texas. I ask you to vote no.